Hey guys, Mr. Happy here, and today I'm going to be providing some commentary over some beta footage from Destiny. I'm playing this on the PS3, but don't worry, I'll be playing the full game on the PS4. Now this is going to be my POV. I am playing as a Hunter, which is one of the 3 classes in the game. I am playing as the Gunslinger subclass, which is the only subclass we are available to play in the game. And I'm going to be playing in the only strike currently available in the beta, the Devil's Lair. For those of you unfamiliar, a strike is like a dungeon in an MMO or any other RPG, really. Also in this video, I'm going to be talking about my choice of weapons, I'm going to be talking about the Hunter class as a whole, and I am going to be talking about the strike and the bosses that we encounter in here for the most part. So without further ado, let's just get right in. I've also edited this down heavily because the clip was actually about 30 to 35 minutes and I wanted to make it somewhat watchable. Now, one thing about the strike I found odd was that they don't start you right in the strike or even right outside of it. You have to get on your mount and drive a little bit in order to get there. It's not too far. It's only about maybe 15-20 seconds by mount, but I still found it strange, and I've seen a lot of groups have trouble even getting to the entrance alive sometimes because there are groups that do this at level 6, which is the recommended level for this strike, and you have to pass by a bunch of level 8s and 9s in order to get there. So if you're new to this strike, I highly recommend just skipping past all those enemies and getting right into the dungeon like I did right here. As for my weapon choice inside of the strike, I am using a pulse rifle, which is akin to the battle rifle of Halo. I'm also using a sniper rifle and a rocket launcher. That's my primary, special, and heavy weapons that I'm using right there. Now I'm going to go out and say I'm not a huge fan of this pulse rifle. I had picked up some gear that had improved reload speed for my pulse rifle, and I wanted to give it a shot since I had just hit level 8 on this Hunter. But overall, I'm not a huge fan of this exact subclass of the weapon. Each weapon does have its additional subclasses, which can give it varying stats, such as a faster rate of fire, or higher impact, or bigger magazine. And the pulse rifle with the gear that I have just feels very suboptimal for this kind of strike. It's not my preferred playstyle as well. It also means that my kit is sort of well balanced. I have a mid to low range primary weapon. I have a long range secondary weapon, and I have a sort of any range heavy weapon, because you can use a rocket launcher point blank. Nothing's going to stop you from doing that. But I much prefer mid to long range weaponry, so I'm going to look pretty bad with this pulse rifle right here. So the pulse rifle, as I've said, it fires off very similarly to the battle rifle of Halo, where it shoots 3 bullets at a time. And for that reason, I find that having a magazine that only holds 18 bullets, or a total of 6 clicks, which will use all of your ammo right away, I found it very uninspiring. I didn't find it to be that effective on most enemies, especially not these enemies like captains or even vandals and dregs. I just found it to be overall very ineffective. It also didn't have that high of an attack or impact stat, which means that it doesn't really do great damage as a whole. So in the future, I'm probably going to be switching over to a scout rifle, which is more my mid to long range weaponry that I prefer. Now, the Hunter class, luckily, you can do whatever you want. Now, the Gunslinger is really more about that mid to long range gameplay, and that's what I'm playing right here. So you're going to see me using quite a few different abilities that I've unlocked. Now, you have a variety of grenades that you can use within each subclass. You can only have one of them equipped at a time. And the one I have equipped right now, when I throw it, it'll break off into several mini homing grenades, and if an enemy walks into the zone, they'll all lock onto them and track them down and do as much damage as they can. Now, this is not so great of a grenade so far, in my opinion. I think it'll work better in PvP, but the only thing I'm able to really achieve with it in PvE is that enemies won't walk into a zone of danger. If they see that if they walk forward, they're going to be hurt, they will not do that willingly. So it can create zones of pressure where your enemies can't flank you, but I'm still not that great of a fan of it. I'm more of I want a grenade that has an impact on the enemies that I'm fighting and killing, you know? I don't want to just throw a grenade that'll prevent me from being flanked. If I'm going to try and prevent myself from being flanked, I'm the kind of person who prefers to do it by shooting something in the head. And the other ability that the Hunter class has with the Gunslinger subclass is a throwing knife, which will replace your melee attack if you do it from a far enough distance. If it's active, but you're in melee range, it actually won't throw the grenade. As you can see right there, I actually had it active, but it didn't throw the throwing knife. So it's really good for picking off kills, and it has some synergy with your other abilities later on. But I am a very melee heavy person, and I'm not very good with the throwing knife either. Now, the last ability for the Gunslinger subclass is this right here, the Golden Gun, which so far is my favorite class ability in the game. I mean, if you've played GoldenEye on the N64, you know what the golden gun does. It pretty much just decimates everything it touches. It'll one-shot most common enemies like vandals, dregs. Some enemies without overshields can definitely die in a single hit if there's a big enough level difference. But I found it to be most effective at taking out enemies that don't die very quickly, like captains or wizards, because it can break the shield and then it can kill them immediately without you really having to waste any ammo. But the one thing I really want to talk about with the golden gun, and really every supercharged ability in the game, I feel like a lot of people look over this, is that whenever you kill somebody with your supercharged weapon, whether you be on any of the classes, Warlock, Hunter, or Titan, Hunters obviously being the golden gun, like I said before, it generates orbs of light. And I've seen groups just not even know what this does. If an ally generates an orb of light, you can pick it up and it will very, very highly charge your supercharged bar. So, for example, my ally just generated 4 orbs of light. If I didn't have any supercharged, as you can see, mine's full right now, but if I didn't have any supercharged, I could walk over those orbs of light that he generated, and it will generate a lot of my supercharged bar. So it's actually very useful in these situations to use your supercharged more often, because it can actually allow for your allies to supercharge more often. Now, keep in mind, it only generates orbs if you kill an enemy. So if you use your supercharged on a boss, it really doesn't do much other than just some additional damage. So far, I preferred using my supercharges to wipe out enemies, unless, of course, I felt that there wasn't really a need to. Enemies that die in a single melee hit, for example, if they're swarming you, I don't really find that to be a good use of, especially the Hunter golden gun. I think it's better for the Titan and the Warlock, but not so much for the Hunter, where it's more about precision kills, using every bullet to the maximum effectiveness. So, moving forward in the strike, you're probably wondering when I'm going to start talking about bosses. Well, the first boss is actually fairly simple. He's very similar to some of the story mode bosses, where he's just kind of a stronger version of the enemies you've already been fighting. He doesn't really do anything special. There's just a lot of waves of enemies you have to deal with before fighting him. So I didn't really have anything to say. In fact, he died so fast, I didn't even see that he spawned. My teammates killed him within seconds of him coming out. So there's really not much to say about the first boss here. If you're, no matter what you are, just use your strongest weapons, your specials, and your heavies, and you can kill the first boss pretty quickly in this strike. Now, this second boss is where I see most people struggle, and that's because the boss is extremely powerful. He's got a lot of HP, and there's a lot of enemies in the area that can just bug you. So the second boss is the Devil Walker, and I've heard a few different ways of dealing with him, depending on what your weapon choice is. I usually like to go for long-range poke onto his weak spots, which are his legs. If you destroy a leg, it does a lot of initial damage to him, and then it also opens up his core to take less damage. So this is the kind of fight where I actually prefer to have the sniper rifle, which is why I brought it as my secondary weapon. Now, this sniper rifle, I also have a stat on it, or a stat on my gear, that whenever I land a precision kill with it, which is basically a headshot, I'll have a much faster reload speed, which I just love for situations like this. So that is what I am going to be doing for the most part in this video, but I do like to get in close. Occasionally, I need to revive an ally who's much closer to the boss, and for that, I actually prefer items such as the fusion rifle, items that have very high impact stat. The impact stat and the attack stat is something I'll have to talk about in another video because it's very hard to explain just sort of on the fly. And it's one of the more confusing stats I've seen implemented in the game. It definitely doesn't have as much readability as the rest of the game does, that's for sure. So I've heard a lot of different strategies for taking on this boss. Some people have told me to take out his strongest cannon so he can't do things like one-shot your allies. I have spent entire fights trying to destroy his cannons with no success, so unless my entire team is doing it, I don't even know if it's possible. For the most part, most groups will either bring something like a fusion rifle, a shotgun, something with high impact, go into melee range and sort of just deal damage to him without really trying to focus on any of his specific points. I know that if you have a weapon that benefits more from critical hit rates or precision hits, such as the sniper rifle or a scout rifle or something along those lines, that going for his legs and trying to expose his core is the more effective way of going about it. In fact, almost every group I've done this with seems to go for that strategy where they destroy a leg, then they attack his core, and then they retreat and they do it 4 or 5 times is usually enough to kill the boss unless you have somebody with a fusion rifle in your party. The fusion rifle is able to do a high amount of damage no matter where you shoot the Devil Walker. So if you're somebody who's not big on having to deal with precision strikes, like as you can see, just shooting a leg, trying to get the precision damage right here. If you're not a fan of having to shoot the boss in one place, I definitely recommend bringing a fusion rifle to this boss. Now, I went with my sniper rifle here at the close range because it did about 3,000 damage right there with attacking the core. And I'm the kind of person who likes to see big numbers, so I prefer high precision weapons that do a lot of damage if you're able to land the hits properly, such as a sniper rifle. Now, I cut ahead. We're about to finish the boss. I'm not gonna be honest, it took us about 12 to 13 minutes to kill this boss, and I had fairly competent allies. I've taken over an hour and a half to kill this boss in the past with allies that die constantly, or allies that are afraid to do damage to the boss, allies that try to be too close in melee range too often, and they just die repeatedly, and it can get really, really rough on this boss. But don't give up. Just focus on staying alive. Remember when you pick up an ally, you become shielded for a short time? That can definitely be made useful in order to keep the party going. Sometimes it's safer to just hang back, let your party members or your strike members respawn naturally after 30 seconds, your only goal being to stay alive. But that's not necessarily a fun play style, to just sit there for 30 seconds waiting for your allies to revive, just because you're the only guy alive, and if you die, it all falls on you to have let everything fail because you didn't raise anybody, and you weren't able to stay alive to let your allies respawn naturally. So, after dealing with that second boss, which I find the Hunter to be very, very effective on that boss, I don't find the throwing knife necessarily to be that effective, but the other grenade, not the one that you see me using, but the other grenade is extremely effective on that boss. If you throw it directly under him, it can do some fairly good damage. Now, this is the final boss of the strike, which, by the way, is called the Devil's Lair. So this is the devil, and here is his lair. Sepix Prime is not nearly as hard as the second boss. He's a little bit more annoying, but this feels more like a fight where you can kind of stay out in the open and dodge his attacks naturally without ever feeling like, oh, I have to hide because this thing's gonna one-shot me in about 2 seconds. See, as you can see, I just used my golden gun there. Didn't generate any orbs of light because I didn't actually land a kill. And this is another fight where I'm actually not so much a fan of precision weapons on this boss, such as the scout rifle. The sniper rifle I'm okay with because I'm just comfortable using it. But this is the kind of fight where I kind of wish I'd bring a fusion rifle to the fight because of the high impact stat. I can hit the boss from any side and I can still do a lot of damage because his only major weak spot is right in the center of his eye. And unlike the Devil Walker, where I can sometimes find long periods of time where I can just shoot him in the legs and do a lot of damage, this guy doesn't really do that. He turns and faces your allies quite often. When he's facing you, it usually means you're going to have to be doing some dodging, like as you just saw right there. As soon as he turned to look at me, I kind of had to hide behind cover because I'm not really standing in a great spot. I could just double jump over it if I wasn't standing below a platform. But this boss was very, very fun despite not necessarily being that difficult. There's a lot of enemies that spawn throughout this fight. He's constantly summoning vandals and dregs. As you can see right here, there's like an army of them just charging in after me. And it's definitely a more high-octane fight compared to the Devil Walker, where most groups will be sort of cautious because he can kill them so easily. The only thing you really have to be cautious about on this fight, or at least from my experience, is getting too close. He can do a move where he sort of just does an area attack around him, and it can kill you in about 2 or 3 seconds if you're not too careful. I think you'll see one of my allies die to it at some point here. But overall, I thought the strike was great. I'm loving the Hunter class thus far, specifically the Gunslinger subclass, but the other subclass is actually called the Blade Dancer, I believe. And it has abilities like an arc light, and it has sort of a ranged melee attack where you blink forward, you teleport forward, and melee an enemy from a distance. So I'm actually really looking forward to the full game to try out the Blade Dancer subclass. So yeah, that's really all I have to say. I'm definitely going to be making more Destiny videos. I have some footage from PvP that I need to upload, as embarrassing as it is, because I'm not that great at PvP, but you know what? One of the only games I loved doing PvP in when I grew up was Halo. And this game has a very Halo-ish feel that I'll speak about more when I'm actually doing the PvP videos. It's just excellently done. There's multiple maps, there's multiple modes. It's exactly what I want, and it feels like Halo. Reminds me of my childhood, and to be honest, I like it. So thank you guys for watching this video on the strike. If you want to follow me or if you want to add my PSN or anything, I'll put those in the description below. Maybe I'll start posting on the official Destiny forums. I've mostly just been reading and making sure I understand how the stats work and how people are approaching the game and understanding the bosses and whatnot. I've been doing a lot of studying on this game, and so far there's a lot more depth than I initially gave it credit for. Some of the stats felt very linear when I first started playing, but now I understand them a little bit better and how you can actually make your own builds and playstyle unique to you in this game. So we're going to dance our way out of this video because that's how you should end every strike, is with a dance. You even get a nice little recall of all your upgrades, any bounties you were working on, as well as your kill-death ratio, how many precision kills you got, and the loot you got. So hopefully you guys are looking forward to more Destiny videos. Again, you can follow me on Facebook or Twitter, as well as follow me on Bungie's website. But anyway, guys, thank you for watching, and until next time, take care.